Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike.
Hey, everybody.
Glad to see you doing well, sir. Always fun to talk comics with you. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a difference that me and you are seeing just in generation gap. Both of us have teenagers, and both of us take our kids to the comic book store regularly. And
Yeah.
we see every week that our kids do not walk to the new comic shelf. They walk over to the section of manga. We have noticed, obviously, I love Barnes and Noble. It's one of my favorite spots to take my wife just on like a quick coffee date because we have kids. So we get to go get
Yeah.
a coffee, walk around a bookstore. Noticed
Right.
in Barnes and Noble that comic book graphic novel wall has shrunk to about one shelf about this big, and it's inside a five-walled manga section. And there's a bunch of people in that area, and none of them are glancing at the graphic novels. You look at the presence of anime, you look
Bad.
at the presence of manga just in the overall culture. I mean, if you just drive around and like look at people's cars and the stuffed animals and things that people hang from their cars and stuff, it's a lot more anime stuff and manga embrace. I mean, these manga movies are even getting big enough, or the anime movies are even getting big enough now. They're releasing some of these wide in theaters and they're doing really well. And
Yeah.
so while you and I are manga amateurs, we both have kids and we've talked to them about that. We've kind of looked at some ourselves as well. And just looking at the overall feedback of why is manga going over comic books? Why is it winning? And I think there's 3 points that we can kind of point to, and I think we can talk about these 3 points and then talk about how we think comic books could actually correct to kind of catch where this is. And so the first thing I kind of talk to my kid and ask him, why is manga more attractive to you than comic books? And he kind of pointed out for him, comic books is not really about adventure and escapism anymore. Comic books is more about trying to make a social statement or trying to address real world political issues or social issues or a grasp with what is America's history or anything in so many comic books. And he goes, they don't do that in manga. He goes, I don't ever pick up One Piece or Dragon Ball Z or My Hero Academia or any of these ones that I read or Kaiju number eight and ever see them like, hey, Japan in the 40s did this really shady thing and we need to address it.
Yeah.
Instead, it is a complete escapism. I can read the book. I completely go into these different worlds. One Piece is simply just a guy named Luffy trying to become the king of the pirates and
Yeah.
dealing with that. And he goes, if I try to read Captain America, it is about anything other than Captain America trying to be a hero and stop crime. And so I think that's a major issue. Mike, is that something that you would agree with as well as why you think this has become a huge differentiator of why some folks are enjoying manga a lot more than comics?
I think the storytelling, for one, our children are of a generation where, um, when they came into comic books, they came into it via the movies. And we always took our kids to the movies when they were growing up, and they got to see Thor and Hulk and Spider-Man and Superman and Batman on the big screen. And they delved into comics to an extent, but the history and the convoluted continuity was something that was challenging for my 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid when he was growing up. So they would just wait for the next movie, and the movies had a decent continuity. It was a great jumping on point. I think my son's third birthday was Iron Man birthday. I think Iron Man 2 or something came out. We had an Iron Man birthday party, and we could, buy the older version, the first movie, and get him up to speed very quickly, and he was good. The thing that he loves about the manga is the consistency of the stories, and like he'll delve into one of his current favorites is Yozakura Family, pure fantasy. It's a story and art by Hitsuchi Gondaria. And so and he does them all. He does them all. He
Every
does
page, every panel.
all the stories for every book, and it comes out in volumes about once a month. This is volume 9, and so you can put them on your sub list at the comic book shop, and then when it comes in, they let you know the new Yozakura family's out. It's about a family of assassins, family in quotes. Some of them are relatives, the others are they've picked up, and it's just a kind of a fun story. I think it has an anime that goes with it that he's also watched, and the art is good, but there's no jumping on point. There's no 50, 60 years of history, for him to
Catch up
understand.
with her. Yeah, no, that the
Like,
continuity being a clean
it's very
point for them is a
clean,
huge selling point
and
as well.
yeah, and he doesn't have to wonder, like, why does the art look weird in Yozakura family this month? Um, because you know Hitsuchi just draws and writes the whole story himself,
Yep. I
and
think it
everyone
does
is
set
that.
it does set a standard that if you're a fan of that, it's consistency. We're even in Absolute Batman. We're on issue 4, and we have a fill-in artist. And it's like we can't get 100 pages of content over 5 months with the same writer and artist. And I think that's something comic books has to grapple with. And one of the things I'll hear people talk about with manga and comics is, look, they're different formats. They're not. And the big reason I say that is, look, it's an illustrated story in comic panels. So
Yeah.
for comic books to act like, well, this isn't our direct competition. Yes, it is. It's beating
Oh,
you.
it
It's
totally is.
destroying you, right?
And DC's trying to get in on the manga fun, so they
And it
do
just
this.
never connects at the
It's
same
the
level for
Superman,
folks.
but it's Japanese artist and writer, and it's the same artist and writer.
Yep. No, and I think that's the thing is we have seen DC and Marvel try. I think the biggest reason I don't necessarily think that DC and Marvel have to take the manga format. I think DC and Marvel, and me and you have talked about this before at times, but I think it's just as simple as, look, what we're doing with manga is people are getting these sizable chunks of the story, and they
Yeah.
accommodate themselves to go, hey, you know what? I get 80 to 100 pages at a time. It's kind of like how TV shows work now. TV shows always used to be weekly episode release. That stopped. People want to binge things now. People wait for the season to end. They're used to the streaming thing. And you can sit there all you want and try to go, we don't do it that way. We're not going to do it that way. It's not how people consume media anymore. It just flat
No.
out isn't. And so I think what comic books have to do is I do think they have to evolve to become a bit more like manga in terms of you can still release the comic book format, the comic book panels, the comic book pages, have it read, the way it does for an American book. But I think you need to release a more sizable chunk, especially because manga, the price efficiency on manga when my kid can go in and get what's that 120 pages, maybe 150 pages for
Yeah,
$10
it's 10
to tell them,
bucks.
hey, grab this Iron Man comic book instead. That's $5. It's 20 pages. It's a new artist. You may not see Tony Stark all that much. There won't be any action in this comic because we're grappling with Tony's wrestling with the concepts of capitalism and whether or not running Stark Industries is the right move for him anymore. Or you can walk over and grab Naruto, where he's going to beat the crap out of someone with his whatever powers. You
Yeah,
see
you're right.
120 pages of it. And
Yeah.
he's going to be in the majority of that story.
Yes.
And I think that is the huge gap that we're having is I think manga has overtaken comic books because it's understood what people are looking for more. And one of the things I hear a lot from people, and there's just arguments people make that I kind of think are bad faith arguments sometimes. Because one of the number one things that I hear people defending is, okay, well, there's always been politics in comics. Absolutely. That is true. 100% it is. But I don't know anybody where that's their favorite story in comic books or the predominant one they mention.
Not
There's a lot of
anymore.
Peter Parker one-off
Not, any,
stories.
not
Like,
anymore.
no, when, again, even the classics, right? Because people will point out, well, hey,
Captain
Spider-Man
America.
had some issues. There was
Yeah.
one issue where Stan published it outside of the Comic Authority dealing with Harry Osborn's drug addiction. And
Yeah.
while a powerful issue, I don't know anybody who goes, "Oh, my entryway point to Spider-Man was the issue where Harry was grappling with the drug problem."
Yeah.
No, it's the first annual with the Sinister Six. It's the
Yeah.
first meeting with Dr. Octopus. It's Kraven's Last Hunt. It's the
Yeah.
first time the Green Goblin found out. It's those classic stories. It's the Venom storyline. It's the symbiote storyline that went through the comics, right? No one ever looks at the character of Superman and goes, "Oh, well, at the beginning, Superman was a champion of the oppressed and was dealing with landlords." Yes, that was his origin. That's great. But most people's entry for Superman was him fighting Doomsday or battling Brainiac or Lex
Yeah.
Luthor. There's very few people where you ask them, "What is your favorite comic book character?" And they go, "Oh, well, I really love because of this one issue he dealt with a political thing." That's even an inherently political character like Captain America. And I will say, Captain America is probably the most political comic there's ever been. There are some runs of Captain America that flat out 100% were dealing with absolute headlines and rip from the headline stuff. I think, especially like when Reagan was president, there's a lot of issues where Nixon certainly as well, where they were dealing with that. But in all honesty, it's not why most people read Captain America. Most
Yeah.
people love Captain America for, hey, the Red Skull's the bad guy. He did something nefarious. Cap's going to team up with Falcon, take his shield, and go take back that, whatever that was. And I
Yeah.
think even X-Men, while people love X-Men stories and there's always an undercurrent, most people's favorite X-Men story is Magneto did something like Fatal Attraction. Magneto ripped the adamantium out of Wolverine's skeleton,
Yeah.
and the X-Men are going to get him back. I
Yeah.
think while politics has its place, I think what has happened is modern writers have decided that's more important. And when you have a competition that is pure fun, pure escapism, pure entertainment, you're like, okay, like I was just looking at, okay, this week's issue of the Ultimates. I dropped that series, but it had Luke Cage in it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pick up the Luke Cage storyline. I like Luke Cage. I want to read this story. Well, not a bad issue. The entire comic is basically commentary on the American prison system. And again, I can read that and go, that's a decently entertaining comic. It had some interesting things to say. Some I agree with, some I don't. At the same time, if you hand that to anybody, is that a fun comic to read? Is that a comic that you're like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing. It's so great. I can't wait to see them capture this on the big screen." Or do you want to flip open the anime book or the manga and read, whoever Luffy fighting whatever this month? And I think when you have that alternative, it just makes it so hard to get into comic books because comic books seem so dang determined to make sure, even when I agree with what the comic book is saying, I'm like, guys, I agree with your points. I
I
didn't come here
spent
for this.
I
Like,
spent
it's
five
just
books.
crazy.
Yeah, I spent 5 books so I could take a little break from my job at lunch and just get into a story. So yeah, I think what manga does really well is it's pure fantasy. It's consistent, and also they do a really good job of tying in with their animated counterparts. And
Yeah. No, it's
that
it's a
is
feeding system.
and
One
that
leads to the
that
other.
is crucial because these kids they're into this anime, and then they find out, oh, I can go read 100 chapters of what happened before, and next thing you know, we're off to the races tracking down volume 64, and they're loving it, and it's because it's like, there's just so much on everybody's minds. This medium of pictures and words together is classic, and it should be about the escapism, especially for the kids, but also for the older adults. Let's have a little more. And I think something in the 90s really caught comics, in the late 80s and the 90s, where it caught the readership kind of off guard, where writers and artists really started to push this very special episode kind of commentary
But we're
thing.
more than a comic book
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
and it was a comic books did kind of grow up a little bit in that era, and they were able to tell powerful, poignant stories. But that can't be everything all the time. I think we've grown past that to where now we would really like to go back to just pure escapism. Let's have the Flash run around and catch bad guys, and Superman catch the bad guys, and and
But there
that's
was a
where,
certain poignancy too to when comic books did explore a more serious thing. I
and it
think
wasn't all the time.
the reason the Harry Osborn issue that hits, and I'm forgetting the issue number, but the one that Stan and them decided, hey, we're going to publish it outside the Comic Authority. The
Yeah,
reason that issue hit as hard as it did was the majority of the time Spider-Man's just an action adventure series. And you
yeah,
care about the characters. When Harry Osborn goes through something like that in the panels of that comic book, it really hits home because you're used to Harry Osborn just being a character that you know. And
yeah,
that was like you said, those very special episodes of shows, like Boy Meets World used to do this kind of thing, Family Matters, First Prince of
yeah,
Bel-Air. The reason those issues were so poignant, or those episodes were so poignant, was you cared about those characters. And when all of a sudden huge stakes happened, or someone died, or they suffered something that you could relate to, is like, oh wow, that's not just some random character. This is this character I'm used to laughing with and watching every week, and it's so much fun. And now something's happened. And I think that to me is where comic books I think got caught flat on their feet, and that they for so long dominated this medium of pictures and words together, as you say. And I think what they were unprepared for is they were unprepared for the competition that anime could bring and manga could bring. In that, one of the things is like comic books are still not adjusting. If you look at why manga is successful, like you mentioned, entry points. What I'm always amazed with is whenever my kid gets, the decision he wants to go read a new anime series or manga series, it's so easy for him to find it. They literally have the volumes. It's easy to go. If my kid decided, hey, I want to start reading Deadpool after the movie, okay, well, do you want to start with the number one issue? Well, that's not in Deadpool number one. He debuted in New Mutants 98, and then he was kind of a recurring character. And then there's the first solo series, but it was a mini series. And then there
yeah,
was the first ongoing, and then that was canceled, and then it was renumbered. And
yeah,
then that ran for 100 issues, and it got canceled, and then it was renumbered to a new number one. And then in the last 6 years, there's been about 10 number ones of Deadpool. Which one do you want to read? And it's like, or do you want to walk to the shelf and read Dragon Ball Z? And it's volume one right there. That's
yeah.
easy to find. And I think
That's something I don't know if comic books could restructure to where that was a thing. I know they probably do reprints of the collected works, the trade
they do the
paperbacks.
collect, and I think
Yeah,
Marvel certainly more than DC. Marvel's been doing these epic collections for years now, where they kind of collect. Although, the Marvel epic collections kill me because like my goal has been to get all the Thor epic
yeah,
collections because Thor's a character I've read runs here and then dropped the book for a decade and then read the book again. So I was like, you
yeah,
know what? I saw they were releasing it. I'm like, I'm gonna go pick up the Thor ones. They release them in like staggered order though. So like volume 1 comes out and then volume 21 and then volume 7 and then volume 11 and then volume 15. It's like I have 20 something volumes of Thor, but there's still like 3 or 4 missing in the middle. And it's like again, it's a great thing that they're putting it together, but even in that pursuit of trying to do that, they can't do that cleanly. And I
it's
think
got to
that's
be
a
clean. It's got to be clean like this. You look on the thing and it tells you what volume it
Well, the
is,
price
and
point's a huge issue of it too. And I get at some point comic books look, I mean, it's bigger pages, they're colored, it's more expensive to print. But like if my kid wants to get into Deadpool with the Epic collections, okay, volume one of that is 49.99. You got to be 5 manga volumes invested to pick up the first volume of Deadpool. Or if you want to go the omnibus route, you're talking 100 to 150 bucks. And again, those omnibuses are massive. They're great. They collect so much story. I think it's actually a pretty good deal when you really look at with how much you're getting. But when you go, hey man, you got to sink for that's 15 volumes of a manga into one omnibus of Deadpool. And some of that, again, is it's not their fault because these characters have been around 60, 70, 80 years and they've had to do what manga hasn't, where they haven't had to have, hey, it's the eighth decade of the story of Naruto or whatever, right? They
yeah,
don't have that. But I do think comic books need to find
At
some
least,
way to do a clean starting point where people can look and go, hey, starting from here, now that manga is such a direct competition, and go, okay, I can start from this point and I'm good.
yeah. And then every year they could have one of these, and I don't know. It's just amazing to me that we can do what it was it Naruto or Ichigo or whatever, and it's been going on for like 20 years.
Oh yeah, like
But
that One
you,
Piece is 300, 100 and something odd volumes
yeah,
into
and
that thing.
and you could go to Barnes and Noble, and there's the number one. It's like they always have it in stock.
No, and that's the other huge piece. It's
It's like, how do you
the
do
co
that?
the collector
Somebody's got to figure it out.
speculation of comic books, while understandable, I think has turned into its biggest enemy. And
Yeah,
that go collect any number one of, and again, part of it is because yes, you're trying to hunt down a book from the 1930s. But one of the things that I think comics is hurt with, the collector piece. Look, I have comics. I mean, I've been collecting Iron Man ever since the 2008 movie came out. I had a few as a kid. That movie, I was the right age when it came out. I was 18, 19. I had some money in my pocket, and I was like, you know what? First job out of college, I got some extra money. That was a really great movie. I'm gonna go hunt down Iron. And I've been collecting Iron Man ever since then. Even for me, who's in the hobby, it's hard to keep up. There's always number ones, and there's this series, and there's International Iron Man and Invincible Iron Man, and then we're starting it again as Tony Stark Iron Man. And like again, I'm a collector nerd who keeps them all in the Mylar bag and boards and stacked and
yeah.
organized. But it's even hard for me to keep up with all of it. I can't imagine for a fresh collector who goes in and sees a movie and is like, "Oh, cool, I'm gonna start reading that." Like, good luck, man. Like, and I think that's the part where comic books to me I do think there almost needs to be a hard reset where and I think Absolute Universe could do this, where they have it where yes, you're going to make some of the older folks like ourselves not happy, but I do think they need to have a point where kids can look and go, I liked Superman. I want to start reading Superman, and I can start at this point and read forward. Because you're going to come up on this issue every time, where there's going to be millions of people who go check out this Superman movie and if they want to go read a comic book that's like the movie, doesn't really exist. There's no great jumping on
That's
point
the
for
other
you.
thing that manga does so well, which I was saying the anime and the manga, they seamlessly, pretty much seamlessly fit together. And I mean, they would just pull the keyframes right out of the thing, and
Yep.
they animate from that, and it's just beautiful how seamless it is. And sometimes, like with One Piece, I think no, the cartoon started in the 80s. I don't know. Anyway,
It's
it's
30 or so years old at this point.
it's easy for the kids to just pick it up, and they can go from from TV television to book and back to book again, and that's something that you really can't do. Like the big two, they sell their license their properties for these movies or whatever, and all of a sudden they bring in a big writer, a movie writer, and a producer, and it's based loosely off the written material, but it's not the same. And then you go to the comic book store to read more, because guess what? The new generation is used to this. Like, they watch the anime
And it
and then
doesn't
they go buy the
exist.
book, and it's good. And if comic books don't do that with these blockbuster movies, like when we've been
Well, no,
talking about
and
this for
now we're
10
kind
years.
of, I think the other part that is sort of lazy is not only is there nothing to meet them, let's say they do go and, let's say like they would time it perfectly. And they have with, hey, we're launching this Captain America movie with Falcon as Captain America. We're going to start an ongoing series that picks up after the events of the movie for people to read. The thing about comic books is they still can't match manga because one, it's a monthly thing, and so you get 1/10 of the content for half the price when it's
Yeah.
20 pages for $5 as opposed to 100 something pages for 10. And then you're going to look at the fact that, hey, in 3 months, if you really loved the art, that's going to change too, because the artist is probably not doing more than 3 issues in a row. Certainly, they're not doing 10. No way in heck they're doing 25. And that's the hard part of this. And this is where I think comic books again have got to get some more long format storytelling ideas in terms of they need to, before they even launch a book, go, you know what, artist and writer, you will meet every month and make this happen, or we will not release an issue. It would not be the worst thing in the world if we do a buy month where there is no comic this month, but we ensure that it's the same artist and writer. And
I
that's something,
agree.
the biggest
They're
thing that
not
comic book
they're not
artists drive
willing
me
to
crazy
do.
on these days. As much as I know it's a hard job, I can't draw stick figures. I can only imagine how difficult it is to do what these guys do. At the end of the day, it's still your freaking job. And the thing is, you got to do your job, right? If you can't do the art part, guess what? Maybe being a comic book artist is probably not the way to go. And the thing is, they have all these advances in technology. And I know we've talked about this multiple times. If Kirby could put six book out and the art was just that amazing, you can do one. If Jack Kirby could put six different immaculate looking comic books out per month, I don't expect you to be him, but you can do one. You could
Just
do one.
yeah.
And that's all. It would be like telling me that a basketball player from the 1960s, with no advances in nutrition or travel or athletic training or whatever, was able to dunk and score points and do things in a way that no one 60 years later is ever even able to touch. That doesn't make any sense, especially when you look at how much of this can be computer generated now. I mean, the backgrounds don't even all have to be hand drawn like they used to be. And so I think that's the thing to kind of close this up. You have to meet manga where it's at if you're comic books. Comic book keeps going down this line of, hey, we're going to do what we've always done. And it's like, guys, you're losing. It's sort of like baseball. I love baseball, but it's had to evolve. The old 9 inning games that never end, that go 4.5 hours, that your old grandpa was watching, modern kids don't watch it that way. The game has to be faster. That's why there's a pitch clock. That's why the games are all going less than 2 or 3 hours now, because they realize it doesn't matter there was 120 years of baseball where we did it this way. It's not working for the new generation. And I think that's the thing comics have to get to is it doesn't matter if you want to meet anime where it is or manga where it is, you have to.
Yeah.
Because it's not, and this is, last point I'll make is people talk about the industry dying. Comic books are fine. It's the manga ones that are doing well. Because I hear, oh, it's people are playing video games, Read. They're on their phones all the time. Doesn't seem to hurt the freaking manga sales.
No.
So clearly, there's an interest in reading
Kids still want
pictures
to
and
read.
words and stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just not reading yours, despite the fact that
Ouch.
culturally, your characters are significantly more steeped in culture than those kids, the anime characters are. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the part I'll always be stunned at is that my kid, who grew up this humongous fan of Superman and Iron Man and had toys his entire life of those and posters and loved the movies and the cartoons, and now he's 16 and there is still a format. He reads of comic books, but he won't read those characters. He'll go find some brand new Yasakura family or whatever and
Yeah.
read those instead. It shows you there's something broken within comic books and they have to adjust.
Yeah.
But let us know what you guys think. What do you think below? Why do you think it is that manga has so outpaced comic books? And do you think there's anything comic books could do to try to close the gap between themselves and the Japanese kind of manga and anime that's dominating? As always, folks, thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you, and we'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.